Welcome to these lectures on the basics of Biblical Greek. I'm Dr. Mark Schuler. This lecture looks at Chapter 6 in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek. Before we begin, a little review. In your last work in this course, you looked at how nouns work in English sentences. There are essentially three cases, the subjective, possessive, and objective, and that to a high degree word order determines usage. For example, in the sentence, "The bass ate my guppy," the bass is in the subjective case, it's the subject of the sentence, and guppy is in the objective case, it's the direct object. But if we reverse their order in the sentences, the nonsensical sentence, "The guppy ate my bass," even though it's nonsensical, we still know that guppy is subjective and bass is objective because of their place in the sentence. It's not that way in Greek at all. Word endings determine usage. The words themselves can be in all sorts of order in a Greek sentence. The subject can come first and the object last, as in an English sentence. Or one can have subject-object-verb, or object-subject-verb, or verb-object-subject, or any number of other combinations. All of these sentences would mean the same because word usage is determined by the endings. In Greek, macro word order has to do with emphasis. So in the first two examples, the emphasis is on the subject. In the third example, the emphasis is on the object. And in the fourth example, the emphasis is on the verb. With this distinction in mind, English, it's mostly about word order. Greek, it's mostly about endings. We now turn to this lesson, which will look at four topics. The basic form of the Greek noun. What are its parts? How does it fit together? The first and second declensions. These are two different patterns. Some Greek words follow one pattern. Some Greek words follow another pattern. There's a third declension, but we'll get to that in a future lesson. We'll look at a couple of the first cases in Greek, the nominative and accusative case, and how those cases determine usage in a sentence. And finally, we'll begin to learn our very good friend, the definite article. In English, the definite article is the same, the. In Greek, every form is different, but those differing forms are very helpful in translation. This is a big lesson, so here we go. I've put a Greek sentence on the board here to illustrate the form of the Greek noun. Ha apostolos pempe ton apostolon. Notice the word apostolos occurs twice in the sentence. In the first occasion, it has a sigma at the end, and in the second occasion, it has a nu at the end. The sigma tells me that the first form functions as the subject of the sentence. The nu tells me that the second form functions as the direct object of the sentence. And so I would translate the sentence, "The apostle sends the apostle." It's the case ending that determines usage in a Greek sentence. If this sentence read ton apostolon, pempe ha apostolos, it would be translated the same way. If the case ending, the part that changes or inflects at the right side of the word, determines usage, then it is the stem, apostolos, that carries the actual meaning of the word. Both words have at their root the word apostle, but the case ending tells the usage, the stem, the meaning. The stem also helps us in another way, because each Greek noun has a gender, and that gender is conveyed by the stem. A noun is either masculine, feminine, or neuter. Now, let's not be confused here. Masculine, feminine, and neuter have to do with grammar, and they help us to recognize the pattern of inflection. Not always perfectly, but most of the time they do. But they have nothing to do with natural gender. For example, the word harmatolos, the word for sinner, is masculine. That doesn't mean that men are more sinful than women. It merely means that the word harmatolos follows the second declension, as does the word apostolos above. Just as the stem conveys two important pieces of meaning about a noun, its root meaning and its gender, so the case ending not only tells us that how a word functions in the sentence, but also whether the form is singular or plural. Notice how the sentence has changed up above. It's now hoi apostoloi. The iota tells me as a translator that the first word is nominative plural. That is, thus apostles send the apostle. This is a lot like how English works. We often inflect or change the ending of an English noun to make it plural. Toy becomes toys, or woman becomes women. So the case ending can give us the number, singular or plural, of the noun. By way of side note, in classical Greek there was a dual form for items that occur in twos, such as eyes and ears, but that form has disappeared by the time we get to the Koine Greek of the New Testament. So in review, a Greek noun, apostolos in this case, has three characteristics: case, gender, and number. The case is determined by the ending, and it tells us how the word is used in the sentence. The ending changes depending on usage. The gender is learned with the root meaning of the word. It's conveyed through the stem, and it tells us which pattern of inflection is used, the masculine, feminine, or neuter. The number, singular or plural, is also conveyed by the case ending. So when one looks at a noun, one tries to analyze its case, gender, and number. We've covered the basic form of the Greek noun. Let's turn next to the two patterns of inflection we're going to start learning today, the first and second declensions. The first declension is characterized by a stem that ends either in the vowel alpha or eta, as seen in these two examples, hora and graphe. Both are first declension nouns. The second declension shows stems that end in an omicron, as ergon or logos. But you'll notice here one minor difference. In the dictionary form, the form that you learn to identify, in the first declension, there is no case ending. In the second declension, the dictionary form, there is a case ending. Some have a nu, some have a sigma. These case endings we'll get to in just a moment. We're moving at a fairly good rate through this lesson, and there's a lot that we have covered so far. The basic form of the Greek noun that inflects to show case and number and carries in its stem a gender. And we've also identified the key for recognizing the two basic patterns or declensions that we're starting to learn. The first declension has stems ending in alpha or eta. The second declension has stems ending in omicron. We now turn to the nominative and accusative cases. Case ending, as you recall, helps us determine how a word functions or is used in a sentence. The subject of a Greek sentence is always in the nominative case. So, subject, nominative. The direct object of the sentence is almost always in the accusative case. Now don't worry, those harder cases where it isn't, we'll talk about them much later in the course. For right now, just get into your minds accusative case, direct object. And remember, it is the case ending that determines how a word is used. So, nominative verb accusative, that's natural English order, those sentences are easy to translate. But accusative nominative verb would translate the same way because the nominative determines the subject, not order in the sentence. Likewise, verb accusative nominative would be translated the same way. There would just be slightly different emphases, with the leading word probably containing the most emphasis. But usage is determined by case ending. Nominative, subject. Accusative, direct object. So what are the case endings? Now, memorization begins. I've provided for you a chart that shows you the case endings. The chart is organized as follows. The first column is second declension and masculine in form. The second column is first declension and feminine in form. The third column is second declension, neuter. Now, why they are in this order and you don't have the first declension feminines in the first column, this is historical development of the teaching of Greek, and it's just the standard convention that's used. And so we will follow it as well. In terms of the rows, the first row of forms are the nominative singulars. So these are the singular forms functioning as a subject. The second row are the accusative cases, and these are forms that function as direct objects. The nominative plural are subjects, but plural, and the accusative plural are objects, but plural in the sentence. So, sigma, nothing new. Remember those first declension ones? Had no case ending in their dictionary form. Then nu, iota, iota, alpha, upsilon, sigma, sigma, alpha. This is the case ending chart. I encourage you to memorize it and to memorize it horizontally. Sigma, nothing new, iota, 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 or iota, iota, alpha, upsilon, sigma, sigma, alpha. Now I've added to the chart the stem vowels. Remember, second declension has an omicron as its stem vowel, so in the first column and the third column you now see an omicron. Well, almost everywhere. You don't see an omicron in the neuter plurals. And that's because the omicron is a short vowel, the alpha is a long vowel, and when those two stand together, the alpha actually swallows up the omicron and it disappears. So the omicron drops out before the alpha in the nominative and accusative neuter plurals. The feminines can come in two patterns. The alpha or eta can be a stem vowel. So if it's an eta, it will be an eta in the nominative and accusative singulars, and then switch to alpha in the nominative and accusative plurals. The feminine, alphas will be alpha all the way through. Now you don't need to remember that rule. You just need to remember that if the stem vowel is eta or alpha, it's a first declension noun. So, if the word is inflected at the end, omicron sigma, among the words that you've learned so far, that would be a nominative singular masculine. If it's omicron nu, well, here it's a little trickier because it could be a nominative singular neuter, accusative singular neuter, or accusative singular masculine. Oh my, that's confusing. How do we tell the difference? Context is one thing. How the rest of the words are used in the sentence, process of elimination. But we'll also learn about another helper a little bit later in this lesson. Please notice that just as the nominative and accusative neuter singulars are identical, so too are the nominative and accusative neuter plurals. With this chart, you now see examples of the nominative and accusative for both declensions in the singular and the plural. So let's take the first column, the second declension masculines. Logos, in that particular form, is nominative singular. And so if the word logos occurs in a sentence, in one of your exercises, it's functioning as the subject. The word is beautiful. Logon, however, is accusative singular, direct object. She speaks a word. Logoi is the nominative plural. Again, the form is subject. Form functions as a subject, but it's in the plural form. The words went out to the whole world. Logus is the accusative form, plural, functioning as direct object. He was speaking many words to them. One could do the same exercise with the various forms of graphe. Graphe, subject, graphane, direct object, both of those singular. Graphi, the scriptures, subject. Graphos, the scriptures, direct object. Moses wrote the scriptures of the Torah, for instance. Hora, the word means hour. Hora, subject. Horan, direct object. Horai, plural subject. Horas, plural direct object. Ergon is work. So ergon and ergon could either be the work was completed or he did the work, direct object. Erga, likewise, could be subject or accusative. The context would help one determine that. It is plural in form. So the disciple did the works of the Lord. In that particular case, it would be an accusative in form, plural. The works were difficult. That would be an example of a nominative plural. So you see how the inflected form determines usage and number. The gender, that's learned with the word. Typically, as we approach nouns in these early exercises, I will ask you to parse the noun. That is to tell me its case, its gender, its number, its lexical or dictionary form. A lexicon, that's the word for a Greek-English dictionary. They're generally in the nominative singular, those dictionary forms, and then how it's used in the sentence. Were I to ask you to parse the form logus, you would tell me its case is accusative, its gender is masculine, because you learned that with logos, and its number is plural, which is what you get from the case ending. The lexical or dictionary form of the nominative singular would be logos, and its particular usage would be as a direct object, translated words. That would be a complete parsing of a noun. I hope you're beginning to see some patterns emerging as we work with nouns. There are two ways one can approach Greek. One is to memorize each form by rote. The other is to look for rules or patterns. In our work with the basics of Biblical Greek in this course, we'll focus on the patterns, because the patterns can help us remember the forms much more easily. So, some rules to pick up from these lessons. Stems ending in alpha or eta are first declension, in omicron are second declension. We've seen that. That's pretty straightforward. Neuter nouns have identical nominative and accusative cases in each number. Okay, that sometimes makes them a little harder to translate, but as long as we know what's happening, we can work out the problems. And almost all neuters use an alpha in the nominative and accusative plural. That will help not only with the forms we have now, but also with the third declension, which we'll get to in a later lesson. We've looked at the basic form of the Greek noun that gives us case, gender, and number. We've looked at the first and second declensions. The first declension, alpha or eta, in its stem. The second declension, the stem ends in omicron. And we've looked at the nominative and accusative cases, both singular and plural, which help us identify more precisely how nouns function in a sentence. Nominatives, subjects. Accusatives, so far, direct objects. Now the definite article, our helper in time of great need when some of these other things get too complicated for us. If you're going to learn anything by rote, learn the definite article. There is no indefinite article in Greek, as there is in English, no a or an. There's only the. So if a noun does not have a definite article, it's probably indefinite unless the grammar forces it a different way. So for right now, if it has an article, it's definite, and you translate it with the. If it doesn't have an article, translate it with a or an. The definite articles are as follows, going across. Nominative singulars, ha, he, ta. Accusative singulars, ton, tain, ta. Nominative plural, hoi, hi, ta. Accusative plural, tous, tas, ta. Again, just memorize them. Ha, he, ta, ton, tain, ta, hoi, hi, ta, tous, tas, ta. The article will always agree with the noun it modifies in case, gender, and number. It never lies. Sometimes the noun itself will be a bit confusing. If you don't remember, rely on the article. It will help you out. And the vast majority of nouns in the New Testament have articles. It's your friend, as long as you know it. In this chart, I've put all the forms together, the article with the noun. And already, I hope you can see how the article helps you out. Remember our difficulty we had with the accusative singular in the masculine and the nominative and accusative singular in the neuter? They all ended in omicron nu, all three forms. But notice the accusative masculine singular, the article is ton. With the neuter, the article is ta, no nu. So if you have ton plus a stem that ends in omicron nu, you know it's masculine accusative singular, and not neuter nominative or accusative singular. So again, the article is starting to help us. Also, sometimes those alphas in the singular can be confusing of the first declension. But the he and tain are the same whether the stem vowel is singular or whether the stem vowel is eta or alpha. So again, they are your friend. If you're not sure what horon, what case it is, if you know that tain is accusative feminine singular, you're in good shape. The article helps identify the form. So again, typically when you run into a noun in the New Testament, it will have an article in front of us, it, and that article will help you parse the noun, that is to convey case, gender, and number. We've come to the end of our overview of Chapter 3. We've talked about the basic form of the Greek noun. It's an inflected form, a form that changes its ending. And from that stem and ending, we determine case, gender, and number. We've looked at the first and second declensions. The first declension with a stem vowel of eta or alpha. The second declension with a stem vowel of omicron. These are just different patterns of inflecting. A noun will follow one pattern or the other. We've also started to identify cases, that is, how the endings inflect to show us the use of the noun in the sentence. The nominative case, which is used for the subject of the sentence, and the accusative case, which is used for the direct object. We've also looked at the definite article and have begun to notice how that article, if we know it well, helps us parse some of the more difficult nouns. It's a lot to learn in the first lesson. You're entering the fog here that our textbook talks about. Believe me, 2 weeks from now, this lesson will look very, very easy. So, devote time to it, ask questions about it, practice the forms, and once you master them, you will start to discover very interesting meaning in Greek sentences.